I'd like to open the Swanton Village Board of Trustees meeting for this information meeting public hearing on Thursday, April 21st, 2022.
Good evening. The Swanton Select Board here. We're going to open the informational meeting and public hearing at 7 o'clock here at the Village Complex. The first item is like one of
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just keep on and also.
The first item on our agenda is general review. We'll do the same thing, but we have one.
Yes, one item. The board needs to appoint their Northwest Communications Union District representative tonight. So we'll do that under any other
We'll
business.
do that under any other necessary business after.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. As Neil mentioned, I'll be moderating. I am the town moderator, which all I do is town meeting at 3 morning. So a little rusty is actually what I mean, but it's a really good shot. So this is the public hearing on the retail cannabis, retail sale of cannabis in the village, as well as in the town. And before we get started, there's a couple of things that I just want to explain. There's a lot of maybe confusion out there as to why we're doing this the way that we're doing it. To begin with, at the village had not had their warning of town meeting posted yet. They hadn't approved it, and they had a discussion about retail sale of cannabis in the village. So they were able to add that onto their warning and to have a vote on that at the village meeting. The town didn't have that discussion. The town had already, the select board had already voted the warning and posted it. So it's too late to go and change it. So as you know, at the village meeting, the vote was defeated by 6 votes. And then, of course, the school district budget was defeated. So we knew that there was going to be a second vote that the school district needs to get the budget passed. So after discussion, it enabled for this to work legally. The village has to revote its question by itself. The town had many people outside of the village who also wanted to weigh in on this, and the select board has warned a special vote to take place next week in conjunction with the village that is open to the town residents who reside outside of the village to vote a very similar question. It's slightly different in the language, but it means the same thing. Because this came from the Secretary of State, this is the way it had to be done. If we had one vote for the town, and the people from the town and the village could vote on, that would not negate a village vote. That village vote of no would still stand. So the village has to vote yes for that. In other words, the town vote will not supersede the village vote. Even if it was open for everybody, it will not supersede a vote that's taken because the village operates as a separate entity. So we came up with the plan, boards did, of doing it this way. So next week, next Tuesday, polls are open here from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And just like on town meeting day, when you come in, there will be a line to check in that will be for village residents. And there will be a line checking in for town residents. And so then you check in, you proceed down, you'll get your ballot for the cannabis question. and then you will get your school budget, your school ballot. Vote accordingly, then you check out, again, one line for town, one line for village, deposit your ballots, and you're on your way. And of course, if you wish, you can vote early. If you're a village resident, you have to come to the village, do that to the village clerk. If you're a town resident outside of the village, you can do that by coming down to the town office and seeing the town clerk. And also get your school ballot early, you have to see the town clerk for that. The rules of the meeting tonight, we just ask everybody to be respectful. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand, and those of you who are on Zoom, use your raise hand feature. All comments will be directed to the moderator, who will then forward the question to who wants to answer it. Obviously, town residents may be asking a select board question. That's fine, and the select board will answer the same as the village. Village trustees will answer. And everybody may ask a question or make a comment, and you're allowed usually one follow-up question when the individual you've asked the question of is reply. I don't think this is going to be a problem tonight, but there will be no personal attacks at any time, and there'll be no outbursts during the meeting. Everyone wishing to speak will be recognized. There will be minutes. There are minutes being taken, so when you stand, raise your hand and stand and request to speak, we ask that you give your name, so that's the person taking minutes. We'll have that, and it's being recorded on your tape. So without any further ado, we can get started. And we'll open this up to comments and questions. So the board, the select board, have any questions or comments at this time? No. And board of trustees, anything? Okay. So it's open to the audience. So whoever wishes to speak first. Questions, whatever. Yeah.
This on the strip, just to get this started, to do a little history of what has happened here. As you all know, our downtown is pretty vacant, so to speak. We have some vacant storefronts, and we're trying to get some interest downtown. And well, we've all seen how St. Albans City is doing it downtown. They're using public and private combinations or friendships, business relationships. And the village was approached by a couple of local people that would be interested in the retail sale of cannabis in our downtown. And so we reviewed it with them, had some questions. They're present tonight, so if you have any questions about the legality of what the state is going to do with the laws for the sale of cannabis, we're hoping that we can answer all your questions tonight. So that being said, are there any questions or clarifications?
I wasn't at the meeting. So I wasn't at the last meeting when we talked about this issue. The person who was speaking to me was thinking that tonight there would be somebody here to give answers to questions that weren't answered at the last meeting about specific answers to what would this really mean for the village? What are the statistics? Has anyone done a market study? And that seems like that would be really good information for people to have before they make this decision.
So ask away. That's why we're here tonight.
If there's no one here,
I'd like to introduce you to the two gentlemen in the back.
I-
We'll do your best to answer those questions. the market research questions, like numbers we're looking for.
Correct.
This is a brand new market in Vermont, so any number that I'd be giving you would be one that I came up with, right? So we're thinking it's a good idea. Yeah, we're thinking it's a good idea to open this business in Swanton.
This is, the gentleman speaking is Jack Nichols, and the gentleman beside him is J.D. Sugar, the team, and hopefully we'd like to work with the county village.
So the two of you, yeah. So you have a one-sided decision.
Yes.
There is a question on the. Okay, it is a question on the, Zoom.
No.
It's in the chat.
Oh, it's in the chat.
It's from Darcy Benoit. My question, do we know what percentage of the taxes collected by the state will come to the town village? If it does pass, the business moves in.
Zero. Okay, very simply put, nothing. The only taxes that Swanton would get if it had a local option tax, adding 1% onto the state sales tax across the board on all, anything that's applicable to the sales tax. And Swanton does not have that. And it would take roughly until July 1st of 2023 at this point for Swanton to be able to start collecting if everything passes. There is a 14% excise tax. In addition to the sales tax, the state will collect. The state will not give any of that at this time to the Cincinnati. And the likelihood of that getting through the legislature at this point is pretty much zero.
Right.
I'd like to just add to that, there is some, the Cannabis board is probably going to make a recommendation for legislators that local communities could get 1 to 2%. But that's, doesn't seem like it's going to happen. But it's still not going to be a sizable amount.
I had this discussion with the legislative consultant or legislative liaison, Motley City Towns, who was at one time the deputy clerk of Vermont House when I was first down there. Given the makeup of the House Ways and Means Committee, the chairman of that committee, virtually anything has to clear her, and that person absolutely does not want to give any money on anything to the town. That's what we're looking at. It wouldn't happen this year anyway. It's too late in the second.
Do you want this, Jen?
I don't think I need it. Can you hear me okay? So Jen Yando, I live in the town. 2 questions. One is probably directed more towards Jack and his partner. There are many forms of cannabis today, right? There's many modified versions versus organic versions. How are you going to help ensure that the cannabis sold locally at our store, or your store, will be organic and clear as opposed to modified and not organic?
Yeah, so every product that's on the shelf in Vermont, whether it's going to be a store, in Swanton or Brattleboro or Burlington, it doesn't matter. They have to go through a full gamut of tests, what they call a full panel test, through laboratories that are approved through the state before they're allowed to be sold, processed, packaged, labeled, and then put on the shelf. So part of that full panel test are metals, molds, all the sorts of the nasty that you want to make sure that are out before they get into the public hands for consumption. So before they even get to the place where they're going to be packaged and labeled or made into a candy or extracted or made into an oil or whatever that's going to be there, they've already passed that full panel test to make sure that they're safe to consume. In whatever form it's in.
There are also, the state will enact seed to sale tracking. So each plant is going to have a little tag on it, that is going to live through it until it's like into a package. And then you will be able to see where that came from, and the test results for each of the batches. And I think it's 1 per 10 plants, 20 plants, something like that in a batch. that gets tested.
I have a question for Jack too. The state of Vermont, is there a limit on how much THC can contain? And are there certain products that we're not going to allow to be sold?
So the cap for flower right now is 30% THC. That's just what you, I guess, comes right off the plant that you can see, green. I think that as of last week, they are now going to remove the 60% cap on concentrates, which means the form in which you could vape it or the concentrated form of 60% THC. They think they're going to remove that cap and they're going to allow that to be offered. There's no actual product that I've heard that will not be sold. There's really no dangerous cannabis product, right? Like there's, whether it's in the flower form or it doesn't make it necessarily more dangerous. You know, I guess I'm trying to understand your question.
Well,
And there's no form you can put it in that makes it more dangerous than another percent.
but you can have it with high THC levels that
You
could
can have-
cause some kind of physical reaction that's, would be considered typical high.
There are concentrates that have higher THC limits on them that are sold commercially and have been sold for years every day in the United States that we consume.
It doesn't have any negative effect. No.
And for edibles, they're limited to 5 milligrams per serving. So if you've got chocolates or gummies or whatever it may be, each piece can only contain 5 milligrams. And in total, the package can only have 50 milligrams. And as an to some people, that's perfect, and some people, that's not. So, there are tolerances, so just like alcohol.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Crystal Raymond. I'm the Executive Director of Franklin County Caring Communities, and we are the local substance misuse prevention coalition serving Franklin and Randolph County. And I just want to note that the cannabis of today is not the cannabis of the 1960s and 70s. That THC was around 2%. We're talking about a typical THC of 17 to 28% right now. And when you look at things like dabs and shatter and edibles, you can have upwards of 95% THC.
Hi, I'm Paul Chapman, and I also work at Franklin County Caring Communities. I'm also a psychotherapist. And I work a lot with youth. And I wanted to just say that I think I don't necessarily agree with the idea that high levels of THC is not harmful. And I'd love to talk about some ways that it can be harmful. Higher levels of THC have caused people to go to the hospital, has caused children who've gotten a hold of edibles have gone to the hospital. So I think it's not clear to say that it's safe and that there's no consequences for that high level of THC. I would also like to say that I've worked with a lot of youth over the years. And, when I first started as a therapist, I worked with youth who had addiction to marijuana. I thought it would take a long time and lots of therapy to get them to admit that they were using marijuana as a way to manage their anxiety. And what I found was that wasn't true at all. Kids know right off the bat and can tell me right away, hey, I have a lot of anxiety, I have a lot of stress, and that is why I'm using marijuana. And the unfortunate thing with substances like alcohol, marijuana, in the immediate moment, they do help reduce because you're high and you've got lots of dopamine flooding in your system and you feel really good. But the moment that goes down, then you don't feel so good anymore. So what do? You take more marijuana. And marijuana has tolerance, just like alcohol does. And the worse you feel, the more you take. And there's been a lot of consequences for kids. I can tell you, I have tons of patients that I work with, and the majority of those are using marijuana to reduce their symptoms of stress. They're using marijuana to make themselves feel better for social, being able to be in social situations. And I can tell you that marijuana does not help them. In fact, it makes it worse. There are studies that say that marijuana has connections with depression, anxiety, and suicide. And right now we have a mental health crisis going on with youth. I'd like to ask, how many of you know a youth that is struggling currently, just with mental health issues? That's a lot of us. How many of you know someone who uses marijuana and does it a little too much? Like you said, yeah, that person probably should cut down on marijuana. Yeah, I've seen a lot of kids that when they get better, and I worked with a school principal who really opened my eyes. He asked a kid, and this kid had a lot of trouble. And I said, this kid's got a lot of trouble, and that's what's going on. He said, have this kid get off marijuana for a month. And it was a struggle. I got the kid to stop taking marijuana for a month. He really didn't want to, but he wanted to stay in school, so we did that. And after a month, I was shocked that this kid who'd been smoking marijuana since he was 13 years old said to me, I feel better. Now that I'm not smoking, I actually start to feel better. And his mental health got better. So marijuana is exacerbating it. And I just want to also say that we've learned in prevention that environment is everything. We know there's a connection between the amount of alcohol ads that are present that kids see, the amount of alcohol stores, the rates go up. The rates of addiction go up. So we know that there is that. And I think before we jump into a decision about whether or not we want to have retail space, it's worth it to take the time to figure out how do we protect kids who are already struggling? How do we protect kids that, don't know that it's harmful? We know about developing brains. Your brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25. And kids, that's part of what the development is it's your emotional regulation. It's your ability to think critically, the things that kind of make us good decision makers. And using marijuana or even alcohol before the age of 25 can really interrupt that process even permanently. So these kids, and it's really hard to measure potential that never happens to these kids. So to say that marijuana doesn't have any negative consequences, I think that's not the full truth. Thank you.
If I could answer.
Sorry. My name is Al Kinzinger. I'm under the understanding that nobody, if the store was to take place in Swanton, that nobody under the age of 21 would be allowed to purchase marijuana there. Therefore, if the youth are still smoking it, they're going to get it from a street vendor, which if we have a store here, it'll be regulated. We can do away with some of these street vendors. And when you're buying it on the street, you don't know what's going to be in there, whether there's fentanyl in it today, it's laced with something. So in my opinion, I don't smoke marijuana, never have. But I think for us to be on the cusp of starting something that would be a lot better than the street vendors that we have today, I'm totally for it.
Al, you are correct. You have 21 purchases. As a matter of fact, nobody under the age of 21 is even allowed in the store. They cannot go in there. And they also have to, retail staff has to be located at least 500 feet away from the school or affiliated. I asked about recreational fields. Cannabis control people said, well, the school, and they aren't really specific. We have to see how that goes down in that field. But that can be a quick fix next year. Problem. But yeah, you have to be 21 just to walk into the store.
Adam Paxman, Swanton trustee. No. I'm curious, why did you choose Swanton versus St. Albans or other communities?
Yeah.
I appreciate it, but I'm just curious.
That's a really good question, and something I kind of wanted to bring up tonight if I was given the opportunity. Can I respond to what he said really quickly?
Yeah.
As a veteran with PTSD who uses cannabis daily, I vehemently disagree with your assessment on cannabis. So I chose Swanton and St. Albans as kind of the reason and the target for why I thought a cannabis retail business would do well, because it's uniquely positioned in between New York, Canada, and Burlington. It's right off the highway, and there's Canadian visitors that come here. Now they're coming. I'm starting to see a lot more license plates now, right? Everyday gas, food, vacation. Why not retail cannabis, adult recreational cannabis, right? St. Albans is obviously on the same line that Swanton is. The city wasn't interested in talking to me at all about the space. I thought that Swanton might be interested. That's why I'm here now, trying to do it. But if you take a look at Swanton, it's even kind of a bit more uniquely geographically positioned for one of these stores than St. Albans maybe, because Swanton's the first exit right off of 89 after Canadians get over the border. If you're a Canadian that uses cannabis, you're not supposed to be bringing it in your pocket and bringing it across, international lines, right? It's probably what's been done for years and years and years. Americans going into Canada don't have to do that anymore. Canadians now coming into Vermont don't need to do that anymore either. So if they're going to stop and they're going to get gas, food, and beer in Swanton or St. Albans, and they're cannabis users anyway, and they're not bringing it across the border, if there's a store there for them to service that need, well, then all the better, right? And it's not just about the store. So Swanton's downtown area, like Neil was saying, it's really hard to find somebody who's going to be interested in putting a business downtown there right now. I can't think of anything that's kind of the normal run-of-the-mill, you would say legally been legal for forever type of business that goes in there. Cannabis is new, it's fresh. You have people that are saying, no, look, it doesn't matter that Swanton has this kind of sleepy downtown. Let's put a cannabis business in there, because cannabis is strong enough on its own to bring people to your town, to your center. After that happens, after all of these people are coming in and enjoying adult recreational cannabis legally, that's when other businesses take notice and say, man, look at Swanton, look at all these people coming to this store now. I bet you we can probably get some of those people to come into our store, whatever that is. And then you have someone open it right up next door to the dispensary, and so on and so forth, right? So it's not just about the dispensary. It's not just about the legal cannabis aspect of this. It goes beyond that. It's about bringing more business into. That's why I wrote the sign that means business. It's business for Swanton. More businesses here, not just the dispensary. That's why I chose this guy.
Thank you.
Do you know in the state of Vermont how many towns have passed versus how many towns have failed?
Yeah, I'd probably say that like for every 3 that voted, 1 said no.
There's 263 towns in Vermont, 90 have opted in so far.
And not every town has voted.
Not every town has voted. Like the St. Albans City hasn't even voted on the subject, so we don't know what they would say anyway, right?
And to further a little on the why Swanton, if it's okay. Right. We want to make it, first of all, it'll help provide employment. It's not going to be thousands of jobs. It's not like one of the plans, but it'll also, we want it to be in the spirit of like a small town store. We want it to be, we don't want it to be like one of these crappy Halloween stores, and if anyone knows, they're good business. But we're not going to make it like, hey, giant signs and everything. We want it to be classy. It's all going to feature Vermont products, because that's what this is all about. Look, Vermonters have been growing it for years. But the Cannabis Control Board, which I know you mentioned a couple of times, this is they're trying to go to people who were black market growers and say, this is your opportunity now to become part of the legal marketplace. And it's kind of the same craft, I guess, aura that craft beer is, and that's what they're hoping to reproduce. So I like the small townness. I like, where it's located, what Jack was saying. So, and down there, I think there's a super great looking hardware store. There seems like, a nice little maybe coffee shop opening up across the street. So
Fingers crossed.
yeah, so that's it. Kind of grab a croissant, grab a joint, grab a Yeti, whatever, a quarter Benjamin Moore. These are the type of things you stop your car for, I believe.
Thank you for having me. That would be great. My name is Mary Pickner, and I work for the state of Vermont alcohol and drug use programs, and I'm a substance use prevention consultant for Franklin and Grand Island County. And thank you for coming. I do have one question. When you talk about a dispensary, are you looking to have a medicinal dispensary as well as a retail, or just?
Yes, I don't think Vermont's made the final decision yet on whether or not we're going to be able to service medical patients. I'm sure at some level they're going to make that a lot easier for them because there's not many places for them to go in the state right now. And if the state directs all retail stores to sell to medical patients at whatever rate, then of course we'll be happy to serve them, of course, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so what I think about is, there's tons of science and lots of politics, but the things I think about are the future of our state, of our communities, of our children. And when I think of that, and you talk about having a store downtown, wherever that choice is, so be it. I think the ship has sailed as whether we can not have, any shops in the state or not. And I mean, this is what politics is. That's what the cannabis board is deciding, and the levels of THC. But what I think about is what happens. And when I went to college near the chocolate factory. And every time the wind blew in a certain direction, I knew that every vending machine on campus was going to be free of chocolate. Like there was not going to be half. And so when I think about, those kinds of things, I think about what children see, what children smell, what children touch, and the conversations that we have because our attitudes and our culture is changing. And so when I think about how do we keep our future safe, we make decisions today that affect our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. When we make laws, they're really hard to undo. And so things like distancing from daycares and schools and places where children would congregate, like parks, would be something to think about limiting that, limiting advertising. We talk about like taxes, things like that. And, you're right, there is no tax that the town is going to get. And the alcohol tax in the state has not been raised since 1981. So when we think about that, there's a benefit and a tragedy forming there as well. I also think about things like if I went into our state liquor store and I bought a bottle of Bacardi 151, I know that that product is going to be the same, whether it's here in Swanton or in Brattleboro or in London. And those are things that still need to be figured out dealing with plants. But I also know that there's steps made, so there's at least opportunity for some sort of standardization. We also know that Vermont has some of the highest rates of substance use, particularly with alcohol, in the country. And so we can only sell alcohol to people who are 21 and older, and yet we have some of the highest rates of use of drinking alcohol in the country, not just, in New England, in the entire country. And so when I think of that, I think of access, right? So people are purchasing alcohol who are 21, but it's ending up in the hands of minors. And when we think about legalizing yet another thing, it's just another opportunity for children to have access. And I know we all need to be responsible, but yet opportunity is always there. So thinking about, whether this passes or not, for me, what's important is that what do we want our children to see? And what do I want our children to smell? And what do I want our children to have access to? So thank you very much for your time.
Without the advertising, right through the rules briefly, the rules are still being developed. but I've got more rules in place. And when it comes to advertising, whatnot, cannabis control board will have to approve that. So, that much is what I got. So, Sandy, you had a question?
This is statement, and I don't mean that.
Okay, ma'am.
So this is really on time to the city. And all of you folks sitting up here know that the reason, one of the main reasons I started SAP in 2013 was to bring in economic development for Swanton. But you may also all remember that in another life, I was a mental health counselor, and through SAP, I was on the substance abuse committee. And, you know, we've been through this with alcohol. And I bet there are actually people sitting in this room who didn't find a way to get alcohol before they were 21, even though that was the law. So it's a hard decision, but not when it comes to priorities. And I will always come down on the side of protecting our children. And all the things that these folks have had to say, you know, are very true about the numbers that we have in Vermont. They're lying, and about the misuse we have. So I will keep working for economic development and everything else. It is a positive thing for Swanton, but I cannot support this.
Yeah, you have something.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that a little further. Youth are more likely to use any substance if they think it's normal. And one of the things that, you know, when we look at the adult use rates in the United States, we're over 48 million for cannabis. So there is a huge perception that cannabis is not harmful for young people. And we're not by any means prohibitionists. That's not our job. My job is to protect young people. And so I thought I would highlight some of the Missisquoi Valley School District Youth Risk Behavior Survey data from 2019. So, you know, unfortunately, 39% of our high school students here at the Missisquoi Valley School District have reported that they've ever used cannabis. The state average is 40%, so we're pretty darn close to that. 11% reported trying cannabis for the first time before the age of 13 versus the statewide of 6%. 24% reported that they currently had used cannabis versus 27% statewide. 19% reported being offered, sold, or given an illegal drug in the past year. My child is a senior at MVU. I can tell you that she was offered cannabis at homecoming. She called me up and said, "Mom, come get me." So the way that kids are getting this is from friends, from family. Think about how many people have alcohol in your refrigerator right now at home, right next to the milk carton. So when kids see this being normalized, they're more likely to use. And kids that use substances early on in their teen years are 4 times more likely to develop a substance use disorder later in life. So all that we're asking is that we put steps in place to protect kids. And can I ask a question while I'm at it? I'm going to switch hats. Some of you may know me as an EMT with Missisquoi Valley Rescue. I've been with them for 27 years. Seen a lot of really bad accidents. And at this point in time, the legislature has passed the saliva testing and the Senate defeated it. So there is no way for our officers to complete an assessment unless they're calling out a DRE. There are 52 DREs in the state of Vermont.
What's a DRE?
A drug recognition expert. There are 52 in the state of Vermont. I spent 11 years dispatching, and I can tell you that out of every 3 times that I called, there's at least 2 that I could not get a DRE. So are we as a community prepared to send one of our officers at our own cost to DRE school? So that we have someone local that would be able to perform an assessment.
And that, since the village trustees, the village operates the police department.
We're asking if we want to put an officer on.
How are we gonna support our officers to do motor vehicle enforcement if we're bringing this into the community in a different realm? Mr. Nichols talked about folks coming down from Canada. Are they gonna be driving by?
Question. And it's a hypothetical question. Because we don't know if it's gonna make the violations worse or better.
Well, we saw
There
it
might be
come,
more control there if you get a legitimate sales, because there's gonna be substance abuse, no matter what substance it is.
I absolutely
And
agree.
The stuff that's getting to the kids is not the vendor's problem.
I absolutely agree.
The state of Vermont is trying to regulate that, maybe they'll get it right this time. And we've got a chance to be trailblazers, so to speak, by trying this and watching.
So Colorado did see a significant increase in motor vehicle crashes after retail legalization.
I don't think that's
Whether
a position.
Swanton endorses it or not, it's gonna come.
Colorado.
That's only one state out of the site.
People over here, but,
So a large portion of the tax revenue from the cannabis sales will be going towards education and prevention and after-school programs. A very large portion of it. Maybe Jack can address
I
that.
think it was like
Almost
67%
all of
what I
it,
read,
yeah.
yeah, it's a large
It was,
portion of it, yeah.
they bent over backwards to cater towards youth prevention and education and after-school programs. So the whole like driving while intoxicated on cannabis, we've legalized cannabis for legal consumption. And our numbers in the state for accidents have not gone up. Colorado's numbers, unless you're looking at like 1% of articles about Colorado, they didn't go up. And actually, like any of these places, okay, next person.
Two more questions. Matt, do you have a question?
I just wanted to say that the kids that are getting it. Shocked, but they're gonna get on the street anyway.
Or they're gonna get it home, or from their families, their parents at home.
If their parents are gonna.
Taking it, it happens.
I know that happens.
I mean,
What I'm
so-
saying is not gonna get from a legal shop.
Especially
The
with
kids
the
are gonna get
additional
over
30%
there.
tax. I don't know how they're going to enforce that. I know with, when we think about alcohol, we have someone from the Department of Liquor Control who comes in and not only regulates, but they also have a way of making sure. And even then, it's not a great outcome, but it's better than nothing. And I don't know how that's going to.
Are you talking
Sugar
about
out.
the gate to the dispensary?
Pardon?
Yeah, are you talking about as they walk into the dispensary?
So we just
No.
want to make sure we follow Robert's rules, so we go back.
No, and
to-
I think about, I talk about law enforcement or Department of Liquor Control. Whether it is they're coming in and doing liquor checks or purchasing, underage, things like that. There's regulations for that, and I don't know how that's gonna work out.
Well, I believe there is an enforcement, and that's how the rules are written. There is an enforcement part of the cannabis control board. Do similar things such as what liquor control does. Liquor control will hire underage individuals to go in and attempt to purchase something. Fair number of violations. But there is going to be, appears to be, there will be a cannabis control enforcement.
It's also my understanding that any dispensaries, Ashley, that any dispensaries will have to have at least 2 employees for checking IDs. So IDs will be checked at least twice. To go in and then again before anything is purchased.
So there being ATL code before somebody gets in.
Yeah. I just- my name, I'm sorry. My question is for Jack.
Yes.
So with the dispensaries, what are you gonna do as far as, this lady said, there's gonna be 2 people checking IDs.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't use cannabis, so. Also, it's kind of a 2-part question, and to protect against that, from somebody coming in and robbing.
And taking, good question. The first part of the question is would be double check on ID. It's kind of standard operating procedure around the US, on the West Coast and down to Massachusetts, if you were gonna go down south and go to one of their stores. You walk inside of a door and there's not a store before you. There's a small room with somebody sitting behind a piece of glass, and then you just show them a valid ID, if they'll let you even go inside the store. Once they've assessed that you're of legal age, you're able to go in. Yeah.
The photocopy. ID too.
Legal age, go into the actual, store proper, either wait in line, look at products, go up to the point of sales counter, talk to the person there, show the ID again, make your purchase. They put it in a child safe bag. You leave the premises. As soon as you're done, there's no word. You're in, you're out, you leave. That's pretty much the cycle of sale. Did I answer both of those questions? Oh, and that thing.
Yeah.
I don't know the physical specs of any building that would be in it because I don't even know if I'm allowed to open a store in Swanton. Right. But we're for sure going to have cameras. We're for sure going to have a safe, for all of our money bolted to the ground. If there are big windows in the building, I don't know whether or not we're going to have to put up anything metal to try to, discourage people breaking the glass to get in or think of some other solution. But is security on the forefront of our minds? Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, I'm for the shop, but I'd rather see it controlled and maybe get some of these kids off it.
Thanks. Yeah. We want to do it right. Yeah. We don't want to
street sellers out of the town end.
All right. We've got to move on. And I think we've got a question on Zoom. Gordon, is that? Go ahead, Gordon.
Yeah, that's me. Thank you. I think Jack just got to some of my questions, but sorry, I just got here late. I happen to be in Boston right now and went into a store this morning, and there was a security guard when you walked in, checked your ID. The security guard was all by himself in kind of an enclosed area. Then you went up some stairs into the actual store where they checked your ID again. Is that a state law? Like, will there be a paid security guard at whatever shop that's open, and then same type procedure, you'd walk in and get checked in twice, basically? Would there be a on-guard security guard in a store in Vermont?
I haven't heard any sort of law stating that we have to have an armed security guard at the door. That being said, I've been in the business for a while and been all around the country and seen other places do it. I'm very much in favor of having somebody at the door.
Yeah, it was certainly a safe way that I was checked into the store.
So whether or not they tell us to do it, we'll do it.
In reading the rules today, it just said IDs need to be checked. And say about anything about an armed security guard. IDs had to be checked. That's all.
And my other question, and then I'll hang up, and maybe it's to the village. Is smoking permitted outside in village, like the village square or around streets of Swanton? Can someone smoke like they can a cigarette?
I can answer that. Again, in the rules, you cannot, basically, if you go in and buy a cannabis product, you take it home or to a friend's home, you cannot smoke it on the street, in the park, in public buildings. There's a whole place where you cannot smoke it. So there won't be people just hanging out in the street corners smoking it. There will be, but they're in violation of the law.
Okay,
Just to clarify that, that's state law.
That is state law.
That's part of the state law, the cannabis law.
The towns will not have that authority to set that type of law anyway, so it's state law.
Yeah, we do have
Okay.
suggested no smoking in our parks to try to enforce that.
thank you. Sorry I couldn't be there in person.
Okay, the lady right.
Hi, Siobhan Cooper, General Public. I have a few things to say and I'm saying. My biggest concern is signage. Like, I literally do not want giant pot leaves, you know, on the outside storefront. I know that in my correct when you guys said the cannabis control, which I like to determine
Yeah,
like the rules on that.
the rules say that they have to approve. Yeah.
Well, then I ask you as a business coming in, would you guys be for or against hot leaves in the windows?
I mean, no.
We're against it, very against it. As a matter of fact, the idea, the motif we have for the store, it's almost kind of hard to think like, is this a dispensary or not? Because we want it to be under the radar and not in your face.
Yeah, especially if it's on, most of you guys want about the Virgin's Row area
Yeah.
or, I would suggest with glass, people are determined if there's a bunch of products in there, they will break that
Of
glass.
course,
They'll have a small area, but I'm the one who was robbed at Champagne Farms in 2016 for $116.
Wow.
More than annoying, some shit was almost over, obviously. But like, it will happen, with the availability. And I totally agree that if it's retail allowed, it'll be less waste. Children will have less access. It'll still be up to parents to be responsible and lock their stuff up and not allow their children around it. And they'll be up to school people, mandated reporters, and good citizens and human beings to report substance abuse. And I'm 100% against children doing it, and 100% for adults doing it. Well, I can't say 100% children, because some children have medical needs that it does help. A few things that were said, I brought my notes, people. Starting with this lovely graph here. I think it was you that said something about.
We just want to make sure you're
This is off
addressing the,
of, I'm sorry, what's
just
that?
make sure you're addressing the,
This is off of the Vermont Department of Health Impact Assessment on marijuana regulation in Vermont. I believe I got that for you online. It states medical emergencies, would emergency departments, admissions, change of Vermont regulated and taxed marijuana. It says Vermont Emergency Department visits that include a diagnosis of either cannabis abuse or dependence have fluctuated over the past decade. There was a drop in the number of visits with any mention of cannabis abuse or dependence from 24.2 per 10,000 visits in 2008 to 12.2 per 10,000 visits, 2011. Says 2011, the numbers have gone back up to 24, et cetera, et cetera. And then it shows this lovely graph, and I will leave this for anybody who wants to see this. And it says the number of emergency department visits with a primary diagnosis code of cannabis abuse or dependence has remained very low over the past decade. This last was dated for 2015. I'm sure it won't do much more. And yes, marijuana is more potent than it is when our great grandparents were smoking it. But with legal dispensary, you have regulation. There's laws that you have to have this stuff tested. You have to, make sure that it's quality from actual people and less likely for kids to get it in their hands. That stuff that may have, I don't know why people would do fentanyl and stuff, but that's what, a lot of people worry about with overusing fentanyl-laced drugs. And I don't know why they put it in marijuana, but people do stupid things sometimes. And, it'd be easier for children to get if they're getting it from your local next door drug dealer as opposed to a retail cannabis that is regulated. My other question was about security. You guys said you weren't against security.
No, they're very important.
Okay. And a couple more things, but I'll shorten a lot more. Because I took up a lot of time. But my other question would be more about, maybe this is a question more for like the police chief, but when you're talking about the DRE, what does that stand for again?
Drug recognition expert.
Okay, I worry about as a cannabis user and with a high tolerance and likely, I worry about freedom of travel. If I get in my car and I get pulled over and then they want to test me and somehow my, levels are higher than normal, but, there's a difference, as they're saying, between carboxy THC and Delta 9, which is active, how long it's been. But even they say in all this research that they don't really have an accurate testing for it. So I worry more on the side of infringement of rights or assumptions. Because if you have New York plates coming over, they're gonna be like, what are you here for?
So if you
marijuana,
want to give us
stuff
a
like
call, so you can direct you to the police chief to answer that question, if you don't mind. Because I don't have an answer for that. So if you want to call the office in the morning, we can get that answer for you.
The DRE assessment is very similar to sobriety, field sobriety tests, but it's very specific to non-alcohol. So it looks for signs of impairment. For other substances.
It's, not everybody can be a CR. It's a natural talent that they go away to school for several months.
Yeah. It's a rigorous process.
It's a very rigorous process. They can go through that whole school and still not be able to do it. Some can do it and some can't. The DRE, they pulled over an individual and they have to get the DRE, the officer who pulled them over. He or she will make that determination if they are, that gives probable cause for a warrant to be issued to take a blood sample. And that will have to be done in a fairly short period of time.
1 hour.
1 hour.
1 hour.
So, and you know the geography of the law along the states. This was all being debated when I was in the legislature, the House Transportation Committee. The committee, I was in favor of saliva testing. The House passed it. The ACLU, in their wisdom, threatened to sue us. And I said, well, go ahead. Whatever you do is going to get port tested. It has to be port tested. And so, go. But for some reason, the Senate, after the House passed it, would not pass it. They didn't want to get sued or something. I don't know. But so we've had this. I've had a lot of hours of this discussion. I said 53 officers at the top to cover the entire state of Vermont just isn't enough. So that I think saliva testing is still the way to go, and hopefully the legislature will remove that process.
If you decline a DRE assessment, it's an automatic suspension of your license.
Yeah, as taken on.
That's with alcohol
Right.
or anything.
Yeah.
So don't decline.
Okay.
Reading page 33 here, it says the Washington report clearly states that the information presented cannot be used to determine a link between THC and crash risk. The commission now differentiates between carbon and THC, the metabolite of Delta 9 THC that can be detected up to 30 days after consumption. So the Delta 9 is the one that, stays in your system for a while, and the carboxy THC is the more current, and what they seem to test for with the DRE. Is that what you guys are saying?
Well, the DRE can assess for any impairment. It doesn't matter which type of THC, it's impairment in general.
Any
Right. Or alcohol.
So they're just going to establish the probable cause to get that one.
Even with the blood, it says the exact blood level of THC associated with impairment is not known. And it is not entirely clear if blood level alone is a sufficient indicator of impairment for all users.
Well, it's certainly a learning curve. I'm not old enough to know that. Won't be like retired state troopers long ago. When they started the breathalyzer at 0.14. And over the course of time, you were legally sober until you hit 0.14. And then over the course of time, it gradually kept getting reduced, now it's down to 0.08. So there is a learning curve. I think with anything new, you're going to have that. As technology develops, it gets more honed in on things. Law enforcement has technology catch up to a lot of those.
acceptable legal to.
My last thing is over taxes. I was under the impression with retail cannabis coming to town, like there would be more money for, say, a community center or like something that comes and gives back to the community. You guys are saying there's no taxes going to be applied?
That's, no.
Including the carve out for prevention education, it goes to the general fund, and then the general fund gets dispersed as it gets dispersed. Those monies are not dedicated dollars. So
There's no
it'd be
specific
nice to
line
get
item.
in there, but there's no specific line item that says you must.
And I think the word they use is up to a certain percentage,
Percentage.
which that is no guarantee that you're gonna get anything. And other states have shown that prevention dollars often don't get distributed.
As of right now, our prevention budget for the state of Vermont was cut by $3 million, or at $500,000 for prevention efforts statewide.
Of all substances.
In the packet I got from you guys, it said education campaigns alone will not deter drivers from using and driving. And throughout here, I'll paraphrase, but it does also say that we know how the war on drugs went, and I know very well, it just pushed more into private households instead of proper regulation. I'm gonna end it there. Thank you all.
Okay. We would be totally open to, you know, towns that put a 2% tax on in July or whatever it would be. I think that's the live, sorry. We'd be fine, and we won't fight it at all, except for.
Legally, the town is not. Well, I mean, that's true. I mean, the town cannot specifically. They have to tax it. No more than 1%. The town will only receive that local option tax. The town will only receive about 66% of what's collected in the local option tax. The state keeps the rest of the cost.
So while she mentioned that so far the funds may not actually happen while the state make the commitment, that X percentage of the tax comes back to the community, and that's not a guarantee. Would the village be willing to say, if any funds that we receive do come in, then we will put them towards education and prevention?
Yeah, well, I like that.
If we receive the money, I know that there's a chance it won't happen, but I'm saying if the village of Swanton receives the money from the state as preliminary promised, would the village of Swanton at least be willing to commit to use those monies received in the right manner?
I think we have to ask the taxpayer what they want us to do. Personally, yes.
Thank you.
And as long as we're on the tax subject, there was a misunderstanding out there originally when they stated that we were going to get tax dollars from this business. St. Albans City and St. Albans Town have a local options tax, which Swanton does not. And we don't plan on putting a local option tax on that. So we aren't going to get any magic dollars from the local option tax, because we don't have that much of a base to instigate one of these. So that's not even in the picture, but to have a legitimate business in our downtown that will draw others legitimate businesses in, it's a groundbreaking opportunity, I think. But as long as I got the floor, Crystal and you and Sandy, Crystal hit on the best solution. This is bad meal, not Bill's president meal. You keyed in on what the best solution to the abuse is. You and your daughter trusted each other, and she called you. And she got out of that bad situation. We've got to get more of that going on.
Trying. I'm trying.
And I congratulate you for that.
We offer parenting classes. We try to engage families in any way we can. I actually brought pamphlets tonight to hand out to folks that want to be mentors, because we are desperately looking for community-based mentors. One of the things that we know connection is the opposite of addiction. And kids that make a connection with a trusted adult in the community have such a better chance of success as a youth. And I've got pamphlets. Anyone that's interested, please come see me.
Since the town fathers and village fathers aren't planning on incorporating a local options tax, I'm sure JB wouldn't mind dropping a pot of gold on the doorstep. Just saying.
Like. No commitments, but if pots of gold come, I'll share.
Well, Crystal, thank you for saying it, because these folks know that I walk around with a big P on my forehead that stands for primary prevention, which is all about parent education. So I know all of you folks, almost everybody in this room, and I know that everybody is here with what they think is the best interest of Swanton. And I thank you all for that. I really applaud the towns that have voted against this. And I think most of the information here have come from people that haven't lived here all their lives, like I won't go there. So I'm really disappointed that the folks that are wanting to protect our youth, that they are the answer to our future, are in the minority here tonight. But thank you all for coming and for sharing your thoughts.
Okay. Is there any other comments? If not,
One last thing, I would just like to formally request that we have another informational meeting closer to when you get closer to opening or something, or if we have more questions, people will look up things we've all talked about tonight. Just come back if there's, more communication. Communication is key.
That would be up to the respective boards. We'll know what the result. I think there's something that hasn't been discussed here, and that is zoning. Not just retail, cultivation and the process. There's nothing in the town now specific to cannabis. And according to the laws of the state of Vermont, we can't specifically zone something special for cannabis. It has to fit within all the zoning for retail or manufacturing we already have in place. We have to follow that. We can't single it out. It's not allowed in the statute. That's very clear. Hours of operation, what kind of signage there is, setbacks, schools, maybe something else, and you got to understand, as they've said, and it's very true, that the state of Vermont is trying to get people who, they use the term marginal people, which I don't quite understand their theory. They assume that these marginal people are the ones that are growing marijuana. So they want to try to bring these people out of the closet and go legal. So it's going to be, they're hoping it's going to be small time operations, possibly 2 or 3, maybe 500,000 plants. They do their own processing process, their own retail. So are there going to be areas where this is going to be, has a community we're concerned about? If this is going to happen in a high density residential area, because when you get down to that size, it's not all that impractical to have 1,000 plants or maybe 500, say, and have a facility to do it because you're indoor growing and stuff like that. So there's a lot of considerations that we will have to undertake. And right now, the town is updating town plan. fact, we've got the funding, we've got a grant because the state put more money into town planning now. Not for cannabis, they want more residential housing, but, we're gonna be doing an, updated town plan. We're gonna have to put some things in there. So when you're saying we're gonna follow up on it, irregardless of whether this vote goes yes or no, cultivation and processing can happen anywhere. There's no opt-in on that. Somebody can come into town of Swanton tomorrow and wanna, you know, have growing and processing facility. And we have to look at it the same way we look at all other things. You know? So there's a lot to be considered. And it will be your opportunity for the public to get involved as when the zoning is drafted.
I did ask at the last planning commission if they had any idea about zoning sites, but they were not. I think you're referencing DSA 24/24/14 where it says you can't, where you can't. And I totally agree, you shouldn't like not allow retail cannabis or put a tax on them that you wouldn't put on others.
Oh, you can't.
Absolutely.
You can't.
And then like that one also prevents municipalities from coming in and putting in stricter rules against cannabis as opposed to alcohol. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, we worked with Northwest Regional Planning Commission to create a guide called Planning for Prevention. It's a community guide to health initiatives. And it includes substance misuse prevention, mental health and chronic disease prevention. So if you click on the QR code there, it takes you right to the online guide, which is updated by Northwest Regional Planning Commission.
Speaking to like zoning is important for a lot of reasons, and zoning for adult use areas helps protect us from our children encountering, adult use items, of which, marijuana, alcohol, and other things. And so having distance is important. But I also know that there's also negative consequences of that. And I think St. Albans, when I was young, they decided they wanted to put all the bars on King Street, and that created their own problems. And recently I had gone on a trip with my children and my nephews, and we had gone to Philadelphia, and there was this great car museum, fantastic car museum. And it was in an area that there were a lot of mechanic shops, but their zoning for the city, I'm guessing, was that any kind of strip club or nude bars were not allowed in any area except this one. And I have to say, driving through the area to get to this fantastic car museum and explaining to 10 and 12-year-old young boys why there are naked neon lights next to the car museum and all these mechanic shops was very interesting. But by pushing these things out also has negative consequences. So it brought down, property values like that in that area because there was a high concentration of this adult use thing. I never really understood it until I had to explain it to them, but then I saw it on a large scale. So it's a thoughtful and difficult process.
Just a comment, kind of hitting on what Earl had said. It seems to me that the state of Vermont is very in favor of having these cannabis shops. I can only imagine that they're looking at the revenue that they would get from these. So, in my opinion, I'd rather have it regulated. If it's going to be here, it's probably in every town. It's already here. So, in my opinion, we need to regulate it and do the best job that we can for our kids.
And that's what we're asking, to have protections put in place.
Yep.
Like I said, we're not prohibitionists by any means. We're asking for protections to be put in place. So if that means
as part of our town plan, really looking at the zoning and in that planning guide, there is sample language that was created by Northwest Regional Planning Commission. So there's sample language in there for all substances. We're not targeting one single substance. We're saying that kids have been able to get access to all substances. So when we're thinking about our town plan, just really thinking about the ways that we can protect kids from any substance.
Chris?
First off, multi-generational water is probably considered extremely conservative. I'm not a drug user and I'm not for drugs, but our liberal legislature passed this law. So, that's says something about our state. Knowing, having been a trustee for many, many years and involved with our police department, and asking many questions about drugs over the years, we're probably a typical community. We use as much or as little as anybody else. And the figures from DMV would say they probably enforce that as well. But the usage by people who maybe shouldn't be using it has grown over the years, not exponentially, but it has grown. Also, I have a relative, probably one of my best friends, who's critically ill, who takes medical marijuana, the gummies, just for pain and be able to sleep. I can tell you that many conversations with him, it works, and he's grateful as well. Okay. Having it sold locally under regulation, this means the drug is going to be uniform and relatively safe. I mean, again, with my research with the police and what's going on around here, the fentanyl that's coming over the southern border makes it to Vermont. I mean, it's a hell of a long ways, and I don't know how we do it, but it's here. We had a drug case with a murder right here on First Street. People are taking care of it. So we're not immune to this. I do believe that a store downtown, properly run and properly executed and a class act would bring more people and more business to Swanton, which is a positive thing. So it's happening anyway. The drugs are here. I do feel from, I have a bunch of people that they probably don't realize it, but I canvass them all the time about how they feel about things, so I know how to vote. And there's a lot more usage of marijuana in Swanton than I thought. And not that there's going to be a big business here, but this fact that it's a fact of life. Swanton people should not have to travel 50 miles to get it. To me, even though I'm anti-drug all the way, I'm personally going to vote for the store. I just want to share that. That's the consensus of the people that I canvass. I think the thoughts that they have are similar to what I have, in that it's a safer way to distribute it. It's a law, which maybe we were for, but it got passed. Maybe it's the best way to make
best of something that we basically 10 years ago. Thank you.
Just my final thoughts, I just wanted to say, this is an us versus them situation. This is us just, regardless of whether there's retail cannabis in Swanton or not, the problem is still there. And I think we want to partner with the town to do, we can, we're an office of 3 people. And the job that we have is like, it's a lot like chasing windmills. We need your help. It is a community problem. Right now with COVID, we're just seeing so many mental health issues with youth that they need our help and we need your help. We would love to partner with you folks.
I was just saying that.
How
I was just saying that.
minimize signs for youth or how to discourage you. And I think the only big danger that we're talking about is that the sense that marijuana coming in says it's okay. And that's the message that is out there with youth right now, but there's no danger to it. And I'm not saying, alcohol is a poison, and none of us should probably drink it, but we do as adults. And, marijuana, people are gonna use marijuana. And that's, that's just what our society does. But the problem is you think it's okay. And when they see this coming in, we need to be sure that we give them the message. I mean, if we were doing driving right now or alcohol ages, we could be doing 25 because the science wasn't there. We now know that those brains need to be protected, and 25 is really the safest age for people to use. So anyone that uses marijuana under that is in trouble. So I think we need to work really hard as this comes in to get that message out to you that just because it's here doesn't mean it's okay.
Right, thank you.
For them or for adults?
For young people, while that brain is developing, we don't want it altered by any substances. We want them to be, whole and healthy and able to make decisions when they're able to do so in a safe way.
Yeah, so let me say one thing to that final. Yeah, we want to be not just, we understand we're a unique business. We know we're not opening a deli. It's not something that is has been done 100 times before somewhere and is normal. So we want to be open, we want to be accessible, and we want to be 21 plus, yeah. 21 plus, yeah. To the town, to the police, to any organization that wants to, we want to be a positive force in the Swanton community. We're not just a business here to make money, right? So we feel, I guess, not only as entrepreneurs in this business, but we feel like there's a responsibility and a duty because we're the first ones doing it here, not to screw it up and not to do this badly. So any sort of those educational, anything we can do, I guess, yeah, above and beyond just opening our doors and saying, come and shop with us in the town and the community, we absolutely want to sit down and talk with anyone.
You'll be setting an example for future businesses.
Yes.
That want to do this, and I'm sure you want to set the best example possible.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we know we're being watched every day. So yeah.
All right. I have a couple of questions for Jack. Do you have a contract yet for the law? For
the actual product?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. A whole other conversation we'd like to have offline.
I know, but I mean, if it's supposed to be Vermont stuff.
It has to be Vermont stuff.
So you are working with Vermont.
Only Vermont, and we're only allowed to work with Vermont growers. Yeah, there cannot be any New York, cannot be Maine, cannot be Mass. Cannot cross state lines. It'll be Vermont grown, Vermont ecosystem product.
Will it be within, let's say, locally?
Yeah, every single Franklin grower I can find. I love to work with and get them on the shelves. Yeah, we have a lot of good growers on the Franklin. There's a lot of people here that are talented at this that will benefit from a business being here in order to showcase their stuff. It affects more than just, you know.
So the other question I got is, how many licenses is the state gonna give out for retail?
Yeah, no idea. No one knows the answer.
Unlimited number. There is no limit. What? There is no limit.
I thought I heard something that was gonna be limited by population.
No, I talked to the person of Cannabis board yesterday. I asked that very question. There's no, there's no limit.
But you guys can set up a CCB, not your own sub CCB
We
within
can
town,
set up our
and then
own.
you guys should say,
I'm not sure about that. They're very,
would be worth looking into, right? Having the number of.
if they want to go that route. But the state law says that I asked that question. They said, it could be an unlimited, but however many.
That could be a zone, that could be part of your zoning for content control, ad restrictions, outlet density, limiting hours of operation. Those are all things that you could do for any legal substances.
I don't think you can control in zoning what businesses can open.
Not what businesses can open, but you can put a density, an outlet density number within your zoning.
The density number for businesses full, but you can't say you can't sell drugs.
So according to the guidance for municipalities, a local commission may issue and administer local control licenses and make condition licenses on compliance with zoning bylaws and ordinances regulating signs and public nuisances. So local commissions may also deny, suspend, or revoke a local control license that violates conditions placed on a license. Local commissions must inform the Cannabis Control Board of such actions. So we.
Similar.
Different.
But the key thing that you said, based on our zoning law,
It's by zoning, not by selection.
and you can't single out cannabis with special zoning regulation.
Right, it would have to be all substances.
It has to be the same for all business.
Okay, I think, we, once again, I think we're gonna wrap it up. Questions on Zoom.
Nope.
Thank you all for coming this evening. Remember to vote next Tuesday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Ballot. Still got time for that. Have a good evening. And I think that more. So I know the village board is that additional business. And